Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is Kunal, still your host, and today we're here with Kevin Ballen, a student at Harvard University, a former organizer and co-chair of the Harvard Votes Challenge, current vice president of the Institute of Politics at Harvard, and a student advisory board member at the Campus Vote Project, who is also the founder of the Engage Initiative, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about later in this interview. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us and taking time out of your day. We do appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
Of course, of course. So yeah, let's get into these questions. Just for our viewers, talk a little bit about your background. You know, what brought you to the political scene, at least at Harvard, and creating your own initiative, and touch on how your college education is actually preparing you to handle the roles you currently assume and subsequently want to aspire to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kevin. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. And I started getting involved in the space when I was about 14 years old. My backstory before that point, and I guess where I got involved in civic engagement, my parents always emphasized volunteering and service and helping out. And we went to the homeless shelter every single month. And honestly, it was all kind of bullshit to me. It felt very rote, like we were sort of just doing what we were supposed to be doing. And it wasn't until I was 14 and I was actually a part of this fundraising event outside of supermarkets. We were raising baby supplies for a homeless daycare, and we were sitting outside and asking customers to come in and buy these supplies so we could donate them. And I got a call 24 hours before the event from our advisor saying that the upperclassmen are out of the event. She's sick. There's a flu going around, and can you take the lead? And I was like, oh my God, okay, I guess I could do this. I stayed up all night making my planning documents and my memos, woke up super early in the morning, went to Dunkin' Donuts, was out there at 6 a.m. greeting all of our volunteers, and just felt this immense sense of agency as a young person, realizing, wow, I have power to do things. I have creativity. And that was a real spark for me. That was a real kind of click moment. And in high school, I was really focused on building volunteer programs at my school that were really sort of meaningful, where students could think about community action and community issues that they wanted to tackle and sort of unique assets that they could bring to the table. And so we had students, building after school programs. We had students building cooking classes with elders. We had a whole series of different initiatives and events that were going on. And then I kind of got interested in the voting world. After high school, went and worked in the mayor's office in Boston. I took some time off between high school and college and really wanted to kind of continue this work. And at the mayor's office, that's where I sort of got my beginning taste of sort of the political world as another kind of form of social change, and was working in their office thinking about different ways to turn out voters and different ways to engage young people. And that's where I kind of got my taste of the political scene. And after 2 years of doing that work and running this initiative called Engage, which we can talk about later, I came to Harvard, deciding it was sort of time to deepen my education and bring some academia to my skill set. And my first day on campus, I got recruited to do campus voting, and sort of have done that work for the past 3 years since.
Right. And you think Harvard kind of, I guess, supplemented the work that you were doing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I think at first when I first took time off or first graduated from high school, I was like, I don't need college. That was literally my mentality. I was like, I can do this myself. I have the tool set. I think it's overrated that you have to be X age, whatever. And I think after making many, many mistakes over those years, came to realize no, actually, I don't have the tools. I don't have the experience necessary. And there's a lot of pieces that are missing as well. And so I'm super grateful, I think, to come to college. And I'm a sociology concentrator. So sociology is all about understanding what's happening around us and taking a real research approach to it. And there's just so much more you can gain from research and academia around social problems. So I had this really big head when I first started, and I think after making many mistakes, sort of realized that college, there's a lot to offer in college.
Right. Yeah. No. And so you didn't actually attend college right out of high school then?
Nope.
Wow. So
yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can respect that, taking on the organizer
Yeah.
role without a college education. That's pretty. That's pretty hard.
It was interesting. Yeah, no, it was fun. I was very up for the task. Found an apartment on Craigslist, did that whole thing, tried to make new social networks, and was working. So it was, there was definitely a FOMO element to it. But it was definitely a lot of fun to kind of dive right in. And I'm great. I mean, in some ways, I'm really grateful for the experience, because there's so many things I learned, wow, I can't do things this way, or this doesn't work, or this is sort of how things potentially play out that I've been able to take to my later work to be more strategic and meaningful.
Yeah, something we should do on the show is we should do an episode just where we talk about college. And I should bring in all the college folks we've already had on the show and have a group discussion. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd
Um,
be awesome.
yeah, no, and good job starting. I started at the local level as well, working on a mayoral campaign. Um, so working at the mayor's office, I'm sure was pretty I guess eye-opening, because that's local change is the best change. We in the political world,
Totally.
and as in we, I mean everybody. Local change
Yeah,
is where you can taste it. Federal is like it's just
totally.
big highlights and CNN. That's really it. um but yeah, no, yeah, that's great to hear. Now let's talk about campus vote project. You said you got recruited on your first day. That's interesting. They really they really bought you up the
Yeah.
first day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got recruited. So I had a contact already going in to Harvard that was basically recruited to be the staff person for this new initiative that was started called the Harvard Votes Challenge.
Mm.
That was meant to sort of be this university-wide voter engagement initiative, sort of the first in Harvard's history. And so I got recruited, literally got an email my first day that I was moving into campus saying, "Hey, Kevin, like, I think you'd be great for this." And jumped on board. I was like the freshman dorm organizer in the 2018 midterm. So I basically like took from like community organizing playbooks. They found an organizer in every single dorm in the first couple of weeks of school, tasked them with basically running these different study breaks around civic engagement and checking in individually, door knocking, slipping things under doors with every single student to make sure that they were registered to vote, requested their absentee ballots, how what they needed. And so really kind of invested in that like peer-to-peer organizing model in the 2018 midterms, and then came on to lead the organization 2019 and 2020 through the last election.
That's great. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's pretty much how everybody starts in the organizing field. You walk doors and you put literature on,
Sure.
give
Yeah.
it to people, shove it in their face, when politely, and at least on our end, register folks or have them vote
Yeah.
right there. That's kind of what we hope to accomplish. So you did that at the collegiate level, which I think is equally and probably more valuable, because we don't know what to expect, walking door to door in the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I mean, college voting is super interesting, right? Like, you'd expect certain universities to have super high voting rates, universities that pride themselves on excellence. But when we started this work at Harvard, less than 1 in 4 undergrads turned out to vote. So, we were, dealing with really low voter turnout.
Yeah.
And, that came from a whole series of different issues. It's actually really, like, can be really complicated for a college student to vote. If you are, let's say, a student that lives in Mississippi, you might have to have your absentee ballot notarized and go find a notary public and understand what that means, to have a witness, sign your ballot. So there's all these like stipulations that you have to go through. And there's even little things like when you live on a campus, your campus mailing address and your residential address and the address that you should use to register to vote are all different. So it's, it's not the most complicated thing in the world, but if there's not an ecosystem of information to actually walk you through it, then you're probably going to mess up the process. And so it's, students do want to vote. There's enthusiasm to do it, but it's all about like, how do we reduce the barriers and keep that enthusiasm high so they actually persist through the process, which is obviously unfortunate. And there's like lots of reform needed, but yeah, surprisingly, like college voting, a huge voting block, immense amount of power with those 20 million students that are in universities, but yet it's really complicated for these students to vote. And they're usually an untapped audience as well.
Damn. No offense, but I would expect Harvard to be at the top of their game. I mean,
you'd think so, right? And that's kind of how we sold this initiative. When we did organizing, yes, there was like a student ground game, right? We talked to every single student that's part of the initiative to have a conversation with every single, student across the university. But then it's also to organize with administrators and to organize with, folks all the way up to our university president, who's now an avid supporter of voting, but also mid-level administrators to do things like have stamps and envelopes and voter registration forms in their offices, or to integrate things into their classrooms or into orientation programs. So it really is sort of, let's do this as an entire Harvard community and doing that organizing at all levels to really get everyone on board. And we have numbers in the higher ed voting space. The study that Tufts puts out, the National Study of Learning Voting and Engagement, actually looks at NSOL looks at these numbers. So there's actually a way for us to measure which is super hard in the civic engagement space to actually, keep a measurement. You can do things in research. There's other, folks that are creating accolades for colleges. When it comes to civic engagement, now we actually have these tools to look at how we're doing and be transparent about it. So, there's a way to track it and make sure that we're really on our game. And we've now rallied the university to, one, be excited about, like, let's be number one. Let's make the greatest voting program we possibly can. But also, we have so many resources as a university. Let's use our platform to engage other universities as well. So we've hosted conferences around voting. Our president has written op-eds about voter engagement, and the entire university has really taken on this initiative.
And the Ivy Votes Challenge. Don't leave that out.
And the Ivy Votes Challenge,
That's kind of how I got to meet all of you, right? We came on the past couple episodes. But I would just like to add, and this is my idea, so I'm copywriting it. Harvard Vote Center. Boom. The Harvard Voting Center. Boom. And I could head it personally. Me, I don't want to, Harvard, sure, if you'll accept me, I am applying. But the Harvard Voting Center, boom, solves all your problems.
There you go.
All the answers in one location. Mr. President, give me a call. All right. Anyway, let's talk about the Institute of Politics. Now, this is something that intrigues me. You're currently, I think, in an elected capacity of the vice president of the IOP.
Yep.
Talk about what that entails. What do you guys actually do at the Institute?
Yeah. So the Institute of Politics is the premier civic center, civic wing of Harvard College and Harvard University. We do a series of different things. So the bread and butter of our work is that we have 16 different student programs that students, undergraduates primarily, can jump into and build different political skills, hear amazing speakers, and put on amazing projects and events. So this is everything from our biannual youth poll, which is the preeminent youth poll that is looking at attitudes of 18 to 29-year-olds across the country. We have the JFK Junior Forum, where we bring wonderful speakers that talk about different political issues or topics in civic engagement. We have a national campaign conference where we bring together higher education universities. We have a civics program where we send college students out into 5th grade classrooms to teach civics. So a whole series of different programs. We have about 800 members usually at any given time. And so that's like really the bread and butter of what we do at the IOP. And then we also are this institution of civic learning and civic engagement for young people. So we host different conferences, different events, sort of convening, whether it be electeds with our new members of Congress or new mayors conference, or bringing together other universities to really sort of learn and connect with each other around civic engagement is really key. So that's sort of the IOP overall. And as vice president, we have an executive team. We help run all of the programs at the IOP. So all these student programs, we have chairs and a board of about 25 members. And then also special initiatives and special events. If you're really thinking through what do we want the IOP to put on for the year, what types of programming do we want to run, what type of goals do we have this past year, we're really focused on meeting the political moment that we're within, right? We saw so much enthusiasm, so much momentum in 2020 with young people turning out like ever before. And
hold off on 2020. We are going to get there.
We'll get there. Yeah, so we'll get there. But anyways, right, like it needs to continue. There was so much momentum, so much enthusiasm. Like, what is 2021 going to look like? What is 2022 going to look like? Let's continue to keep it, fostering that momentum. So we put on a really massive conference where we opened it up to, I think we had, over 100 different schools participate in the spring, coming together and sharing different strategies around civic engagement, thinking through, we did this really cool thing called the Day of Civic Action at Harvard. So, right, we have Election Day, which is a great day for action, but we wanted to promote other things like signing petitions, like calling your representatives and senators, advocating for different causes, protesting. And so we held this sort of day of centralized action around that, which is sort of like the first ever that we know of in the higher education space to kind of promote these involvement opportunities beyond voting. So our goal is really to sort of meet that moment and continue that enthusiasm. And so as an executive team, that's kind of what we're responsible for.
Yeah, that seems cool. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad Harvard has that covered. But I'm also glad you were there to help them and aid them in the process of getting folks registered and actually voting.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Harvard civic engagement, I think one of the big challenges, there's many different challenges, but a big challenge that I think we're facing in the public service ecosystem is that we have an immense amount of students that come in with an interest in public service and civic engagement and doing positive things in the world for their careers or every single day, and then we leave with, let's say, 5% of students pursuing those careers. Majority of our students go and pursue finance and consulting, which is not a bad thing. Like, go ahead and do that if that's kind of what your calling is. But we need to have these other options and also find ways for students to still integrate, what ethical engagement, what public service, what civic engagement looks like in their lives. And so we really are like participating in brain drain and really need to think critically about like, how are we recreating this institution to be this civic center and this civic place, given all the resources and the platform that we have.
Yeah, no, and I would have to second that. Now I want to talk about engage, because this is what really caught my eye when I was doing some research. Yeah, I was doing some research, not that much, don't worry. Tell me why you started the Engage program. I believe Engage was started before you came to Harvard University. And
Yep.
what was the core objectives, the policies that you were trying to accomplish?
Yep.
How did it carry on into your current capacities? Tell me about that.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So it basically came out of the work that I did in high school, realizing, what I found in high school was we don't prioritize civic engagement or civic learning in our K-12 education. I did the calculation in my high school. I had over 1,000 hours of math instruction, of math homework, of math exams throughout the course of my 4 years. I had 4 trained teachers that either had master's degrees or PhDs. I took 10 state, and national standardized tests around mathematics. And we had a 40-hour service requirement. Not that a service requirement is actually the right way to do civic engagement. We had 40 hours sort of dedicated to this, service civic engagement. We had 1,000 hours dedicated to mathematics. How often do I use math in my daily life? Not very often. How often do I use sort of engagements around communities and social issues?
Yeah. On this show, we don't talk about math. Me and math have a complex,
exactly.
love-hate relationship.
So
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So kind of taking that into account, my goal in high school is really like, how do we integrate this, ideas of service and civic engagement and understanding kind of who we are as people and who we are in our communities more into what it means to be a student into our daily lives. And so at my school, we built sort of new programs. We were thinking about, new instructional classes, service learning curriculum. And so I wanted to continue that work kind of going forward. And so this started out in the mayor's office and then kind of branched off. It was housed at a nonprofit called Be the Change. It was basically a civic and social emotional learning program for K-12 students where we put together curriculum, we put together trainings for educators that were really focused on sort of teaching these skills that often get left out. And they were all sort of participatory lessons. So students would learn about identity, students would learn about building positive relationships, students would learn about different levels of government. They learn about social change and activism. They learn about a history in Boston of racism and discrimination, and then they do different projects around it. And it was actually integrated into the school day, which I think was the coolest part. So students would have their math class, they'd have their science class, and then they'd actually have their engage class. So it was put on the same level as these other academic priorities and actually really sort of, highlighted and uplifted in certain schools. And so I ran that initiative for 2 years. We had, I think about at our peak, about 60,000 students that were enrolled in our programming in some form or fashion, or were using our curriculum, whether that was in schools or after school programs. We were a big partner with the YMCA, and we're a lot of in YMCA after school programs and summer camps. And, I worked with experts. I worked with a lot of folks that sort of really understood this, but also just kind of did it from my perspective as a young person who just went to school and understood, like, here are the ways that, like, what was interesting to me, here was what was missing out, and, really sort of built the principles of the curriculum and the trainings and the programming from there.
Yeah, no, I've been actually, pondering, wouldn't it be great if in school, 15, 16-year-olds, there was like a mandatory day where we learned about how to actually vote. Forget like, financial literacy. Yeah. That's been a really big topic, teaching folks, totally. Outside of school, you got to pay taxes, you got to do this. The IRS is a thing. But let's think, shouldn't we learn how to vote, what the polls look like? What is the significance of voting?
Totally. Yeah.
From a historical perspective, I've studied American history for many, many years. And I could bring you back to Reconstruction. I could take it back to the 60s. I could take it back to,
sure.
When James Madison was all, let's write a constitution. But there is not an emphasis within any school system, particularly I was fond of like Engage, where it was actually developed into the curriculum. But where I come from, I was fortunate enough to have parents who took me to the polls. First time I went to the polls was in 2016. So imagine what that was about. But now, so many folks are engaged after the Trump era, and, I'm invigorated. I got started out of that. So, it should be mandatory that we learn how to vote through school. I love, actually, I also have a love-hate relationship with College Board. But I think, as an educational institution, we severely lack the resources and the emphasis on civic engagement, mainly due to the fact because, as much as we want our young people to get involved, they really don't have a platform. They don't have
Yeah,
a way to channel their energy to get involved,
totally.
which is what we're going to address in some later questions. But
Yeah, no, for
yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, now I think there's like two things I want to unpack that you said. One is right, there's a dearth of civic education, curriculum, standards, understanding, resources, investment in the United States, right? Like, and we have some states, Massachusetts recently has, had some civics bills that, require more civics curriculum, more civics learning. There's no tests around it. There's no, expectations or accountability in many places. And also, if you talk to most people about their civics classes, like, they suck. They're not interesting, right? You have to make them participatory. You have to make them exciting. And I think the second thing is right about teaching voting. This was something that came up so often when we were doing voting work at Harvard. Was you have all these students that have never voted before. Like, it's kind of intimidating to walk into. Every polling location is different, but to walk in, to know what you're doing. Many times, poll workers typically really friendly, but they can be unfriendly. Other people around you are in a rush.
I'm
so
a
like
friendly
you
one.
have to make down these processes for
Yeah.
people.
I'm a friendly poll worker, FYI, to anybody who's going to come to the
Good.
area. But yeah, I think, in some colleges, they offer credit to go out there and get real work experience. I think they should offer credit at the high school level to go out there and work on a campaign. Same
Totally.
way,
Yeah.
same way you allocate 40 hours of your time to working at the senior center or whatever. I didn't take that path.
Totally.
I spent all my time working on campaign and getting to know the leaders of my community so that I can make an impact. That I think
totally
is a much more valuable lesson than spending your after schools, somewhere else, and not to say that I'm putting a hierarchy on one over the other, but one may lead to more of a, systemic and systematic impact. Because a lot of research suggests if you're an early voter at 18, you're more likely to be a habitual voter. And that's what we want to instill, those values, right? But anyway, that's just me, rambling about shit that matters. Let's talk about 2020. You brought it up, 2020 election. I mean, not many words can characterize that year. Once in a century pandemic, crazy election, crazy, like too much mudslinging and going back and forth. And I was on the ground and COVID and all this, that. Give me your thoughts on 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it was chaos and so much to kind of unpack there. I think my main, I think there's a couple different takeaways, right? Like, one is obviously like it was incredible, like feat of organizing and incredible turnout amongst young people. Yes, but also like, we look at the numbers, 50% of young people turned out, 50% didn't. So there's like still tons of work to be done. I mean, our system is so broken, I think is like what the main reflection was there. I mean, the amount of people, I like set up a hotline on our campus and basically tracked who had problems with voting for whatever reasons. And we got hundreds of students emailing, casting us. My ballots aren't showing up. My elections department isn't like, answering my phone calls. My voter registration says something different than actually registered to vote. Like online, I took a picture of it. Like all of these ridiculous things our election system is not set up to accomplish, not set up to tackle, was like so frustrating. And I think so many people like woke up because of that and we're like, whoa, like we have a real problem with elections and civic engagement in our country that we need to tackle and we need to solve, and we need to channel that energy to pass things like HR1 S1, the For the People Act, and to do things to like reform our system. And honestly, it's kind of disappointing that like we haven't been able to make these things happen. Given that we all are kind of in favor of civic engagement, all in favor of making voting and access to the ballot box more accessible. Like, I'm honestly disappointed that we haven't been able to make it happen, because there's organizers that are out there. We are making phone calls, where we're organizing our communities, and we need it to be easier. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we haven't been able to pass these bills.
Right. And the next question is very simple. It's one I ask everybody. Is voting important? Not a trick.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think it's important on many different levels. Like, right, voting is our proxy for power. It's our opportunity to use our voices and advocate for the changes that we want to see in our communities. Like, that's one. I think two, it's an important civic institution and civic sort of a channel for us to kind of move people in the full funnel of civic engagement, right? Like if you vote, you're more likely to do other things that are positive for your community, more likely to kind of advocate, more likely to look out for your neighbors, like more likely to be kind of involved in what's happening around you. And I honestly think we have this massive distrust of our systems and massive distrust of our government that like we're losing people, and we're like we need to sort of regain those structures. And I think voting is a key way to do it, and for people to sort of reinvest in the system and to kind of see their preferences, in public office and in their streets and in their communities and in the air they breathe and the roads they drive on.
And yeah, no, I'd have to concur, doctor. I concur. Very famous line. Anyway, I'll try to make this fun. Give me some credit. Should 16-year-olds, I'm 17, I'll be voting in my first election next year. Pre-registered, everything, so you don't have to yell at me or call me, please. Gets like spam sometimes. Should 16, 17-year-olds, be allowed to enter the civic process, the power to vote? In some cities, I know Berkeley, I know Oakland, this is where my hub base is at, they have youth vote. I think in Maryland, they also passed something similar. At the very municipal level, I believe youth is able to vote for their school board elections and what carries on at the local level that impacts them. What are your thoughts on this idea that young people should be given that platform, should be given that responsibility, and could therefore lead to more results when it comes to youth turnout when they turn 18?
Yeah. Yep. It's an unequivocal yes for me. Like I'm sold on it. I think for so many different reasons that you've already mentioned in terms of like increasing voter turnout and civic engagement. But I also think like, as a 16-year-old, you are a member of our community, you have a say, like there are responsibilities that you hold. You should also be given the responsibility and the power and tools of civic engagement as well. So absolutely. I think then it becomes a question of like, at what point do you kind of cut it off? Like, do you let 11-year-olds vote, 12-year-olds vote? And I honestly think those are questions we should engage in. Like, I'm not even kidding. I think these are all members of our community. I think like 16 makes a lot of sense because that's like, in many ways, like there are additional responsibilities that come with that age. There's additional like parts of the legal system that you're involved in when you're 16 as well. So I think that it does make a lot of sense for 16-year-olds to be allowed to kind of vote. And I understand like where some of the pushback comes from. I think there's like some lens of pushback that 16-year-olds aren't equipped. That's kind of like not great, not a great answer. Like I think 16-year-olds are equipped and usually like have, currently right now with our generation of 16-year-olds, like have a decent sense of what's going on in the world and have a lot of things to say about it. But I think it also needs to come with better civics education, as we were talking about earlier, right? Like if people are worried about 16-year-olds voting, give them civic education. Like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be like an either or. It's like, let's do it all. Let's reinvest in our system. And so I think with the proper civics education, like people will be excited about 16-year-olds voting, but I think 16-year-olds are equipped to vote now.
Yeah, and I think starting in high school, folks should learn what civics actually means. That's a great buildup. Yeah, I'd have to agree. Let's talk about Georgia. This is something very key and prevalent, obviously. Georgia, Texas, conservative reaction towards the 2020 election. Some could argue it's been happening since 2013. Somebody briefed me on a Supreme Court case that actually took power out of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which led to this domino effect of shit happening in the United States regarding voting rights. Give me your thoughts on the voting restrictions, the voter suppression in these states. Why is it kind of happening from your perspective? What do you think we should be doing about it? And what should we be advocating, both at a younger level to the older folks? Give me your 2 cents.
Yeah, those are great questions. I'm not on the ground in either of those states, and I think the best thing we can do is like talk to the organizers in those states and understand kind of really what they need and what they're seeing. I think from like an outside perspective of supporting student voters all across the country, like there's tons of restrictions in those states that make it really difficult for students to vote and really kind of like a disheartening process as well. Like I think I saw a lot of people that after they hit one initial barrier were like, I don't know if it's worth it anymore. Like clearly my voice isn't valued. So I don't know if I want to keep showing up. And I think like we need to restore that faith. It shouldn't be so hard to kind of help someone to vote or to cast their ballot. So, I think there's so much work to be done there. And I think we need to figure out like what the organizers need and provide them with it. I also think too, not to to minimize what's going on in those states, because I think that's like obviously where voter suppression is like kind of at its climax. But in so many other states that you wouldn't even expect, like have elections departments that just are not set up to support voters in many ways. And we have a massive disinvestment in election system. Like, there's certain places in the Northeast where it is so hard to get a hold of their elections office, so difficult to work with them to kind of help them support student voters. I had, one student that lived in New York who was calling their local election office like 5 or 6 times. I had to call the attorney general's office to like get a hold of their elections office because it was so ridiculous. They were not responding. They were being rude to the students. They, were, not able to process their absentee ballots. They submitted, requests multiple times. Like, we have real problems in our election system that are at its heat in some of our southern states and some of our, down south, but also prevalent across the country as well. And we really need to kind of wake up to it. And, one of my hopes and goals after 2020 was, we have all this momentum of all these students that got pumped up about voter turnout, all these people that saw the election system and how it's broken firsthand. And how do we then translate that turnout energy to reform energy? And that's something we began to work on. I think our opportunity was like the For the People Act, and we organized, at least in the student voting space, a lot of students to turn out and show up and advocate for that bill. But yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities we can, there's a lot of momentum. Like, how do we carry all that momentum and figure out the best way to sort of funnel and figure out the best way to sort of push those folks towards reforming and reshaping the system?
Yeah. No, I'd have to agree. I'm not on the ground in Georgia either, so I just kind of go with what they say, and see where they need help. But soon, more to come on that. Now let's kind of close out. We've been talking for some time. What would you recommend to young people, Gen Z? Don't know where they got Z from, to be honest. What would you recommend to us? What is your advice? Voting, elections, policy, college. Give me a universal answer. How do we stay engaged? We're the graduating class. We're gonna have to take up all the shit that is gonna be passed down. Like, it's literally on us now. What would you? And it's technically on you. I mean, I don't know how far you are from Gen Z. You might be Gen Z.
Yeah, no, I'm Gen Z myself.
See?
I think my like main piece of feedback, or I guess advice or like words of wisdom is just to like get involved and persist through it. I think is the main thing. Like, there is going to be lots of trials and tribulations as you're involved in the scene. There's going to be a lot of people that like don't believe in you as a young person. I had this come up a lot, and they also like there's going to be a lot of mentors out there that are basically going to like help shape you. And I think there was mentors when I talked about when I was like 18 working in the mayor's office. I made so many mistakes. Like, it was the mentors that helped me through it, that sort of walked me through it, that like lifted me up on a platform and let me sort of run with things, but also like kind of held me down at times too when I didn't understand what was going on, or I was frustrated or upset about certain things. And things take time, and there's process, and like we have to keep pushing and keep advocating for the things that we believe in. But I think it's it's staying persistent and staying involved. And I think it's finding those mentors, and it's finding those allies, and it's building those coalitions of people that you can trust and that can help you grow, and that can be your confidants, and that you can gut check things with. I think it's so important to do this work with other people, to work with groups of other people, to work with people across different age brackets, age groups, to even just like find one peer that you want to start something with. But I think it's finding that partner, it's finding the people to work with, and I think it's persisting through.
Yeah. No, persist and avoid burnout, because that'll
Yeah,
get you
I
real.
think I think that's fair. And like at times too, like there might be something. I've had this happen. Like, I worked in this program for 2 years with Engage, and I was like, it's time for me to go to college and to hand this over to other people to run with it. Like, it is okay to stop things and to pass them on to other people and to move on to your next adventure when it makes the most sense for you. And so I think that's also like important as well. Like, you don't have to keep sort of hitting at something if it's not making sense to you, and to like try a new path, try new things. Like, that's what's so great about being young. I think like for folks that are going to college, it's this huge pot of opportunities just to try new things and to have all these resources at your disposal. And so I think it's totally fine to like skip past to go back a little bit, to kind of move around, and to kind of like really find your niche and kind of find your place in this like civic ecosystem.
Yeah. No, I agree. Still concur, doctor. Yeah, that's great. I definitely can't say much to that. I mean, Like, you know, he went to Harvard, of course. No, I'm playing. Now, how can viewers stay updated on your platform? If you want to link your socials, I'll add them to the description. But follow you, follow the Institute, you know, whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds great. Yeah, definitely happy for people to kind of reach out to me directly. I can pass along my like LinkedIn or email or whatever to follow the Institute Politics channels. We have a lot of exciting stuff that folks of all ages and across the country can get involved in as well.
Cool. Your Twitter, do you want to?
I don't have a Twitter.
You don't have a Twitter?
I don't do Twitter.
No, Harvard,
Yeah,
Harvard,
I like go on Twitter, and there's certain people that I watch on Twitter, but
Harvard didn't teach you
Twitter.
No, they don't teach Twitter there?
Not teach me Twitter. No.
What? Wow. Okay, that's a first, honestly. That's a real first for the show. I think you made history.
Yeah. I used to not have an Instagram either. I got an Instagram pretty recently. I was
Oh my God.
old school.
How are you even an organizer without Twitter? Oh
I
man.
text people, you know.
Oh yeah, I text
conversations.
people. I don't even text people. I call people. Believe it or not, I
call people too.
yeah, I could be very annoying if you don't pick up the phone. Like that's something I pride myself on, you know. I don't get the new Gen Z doesn't like calling people too. I heard that's like a trope or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. Well, I'll link Campus Vote Project in substitution of your lack.
There you go.
Yeah, is there anything you'd like to add before we log off?
No, this was great. Yeah, happy to connect with anyone, and this sounds like an awesome series. So excited to see where it goes.
Exactly. And anybody who's listening, you're more than welcome to come on the show and yell at Kevin for not having Twitter. But thank you so much for coming on the show. We do appreciate it. I think you have a unique perspective. I've been trying to enter this kind of collegiate, you know, landscape where we talk to college students who are really carrying the work that we as Gen Z, as somebody who's aspiring to go to a university, are going to follow and hopefully you know, bear the culpability to accomplish the same goals. So yeah, no, we do appreciate all the work you've been doing. If I'm ever in Boston Square, that's not how they say it. I feel like that's just British. I'll come visit and give you a ring because you don't have Twitter.
Sounds good. Yeah, welcome anytime.
But yes, no. Do take care of yourself and stay safe.
Thank you.
You too. Take care.